Misconception number 5. Desire naturally goes down as you get older, and there's nothing you can do about it. This belief is not entirely true. Yes, I understand that hormones change, there is menopause, there are lots of biological changes in both men and women. But I do not completely believe that desire simply declines because we are getting older. Because I have seen couples in their 60s and 70s who are reportedly having better sex than they did in their 30s. Why? Because they stopped chasing the young, spontaneous model and learned what actually works for their bodies now. And that's really the thing that we're talking about here. The truth is, desire in marriage evolves. What worked at 30 may not work at 40. What worked in year 1 may not work in year 10. And that is why learning is a major aspect to it. It might mean more communication, different timing, more intentional connection, or even consistently using things like lubricants, things you were not using before. It may also mean adjusting your expectations of what good sex is like. But all of that is still part of a great intimate life. Being aware of these changes and talking about them is what allows you to continue enjoying intimacy. Personally, I plan to enjoy intimacy with my husband well into old age. In fact, my husband would say, I'm going to be grabbing you till 100. So no, getting older does not mean everything just goes down. It just means that we then need to reinvent what we know. It means more awareness, more learning, and more curiosity. Misconception number 6, it is my spouse's job to know how to satisfy me. I cannot tell you how many marriages this has quietly damaged. One spouse is frustrated, the other feels like a failure, but neither of them has clearly communicated what actually works. Can I tell you the truth? Your spouse is not a mind reader. Yes, they love you, but they're not a mystical entity. Sexual satisfaction is not a puzzle you hand over to them to solve. You don't just give them and say, oh, go and figure me out. Healthy intimacy involves mutual discovery. This means you show them what you like with your words, with touch, with feedback, and all of this makes a great intimate life. And it also means that if you stay curious about what you like, you also stay curious about what they like, because it's a shared learning process. So when you stop treating sex like a test they are failing, and start treating it like a language you're both learning, everything will begin to change for the better. Misconception number 7, good sex should be effortless. If you have to work at it, something is wrong. This is the lie that makes many couples give up too quickly. Yes, effortless sex is great when it happens, but in a long-term marriage, with all the realities of real life, effortless sex is not the goal. Connected sex is the goal. And connection takes effort. It takes communication. It takes saying things like, oh, I'm tired tonight, but I still want to be close to you. It takes understanding that effort doesn't mean there's no fire. It just means that we need to understand what we need at the moment. It takes being able to say that, can we just have a few minutes to just touch each other? So think of it like a garden. A garden does not grow effortlessly. You have to water it. You have to tend to it. You have to remove what should not be there. And you learn what helps it thrive. So if you treat your sex life like a garden, instead of a fireworks show, you will stop being disappointed by the effort and start appreciating the process of growth. Misconception number 8, are you still with me? Scheduling sex makes it boring. Oh, this is something many people believe. Unfortunately, it is not the truth. Scheduling sex does not kill spontaneity. You know what kills spontaneity? Neglect. When couples wait for the perfect moment, weeks turn into months, months turn into years, and sometimes it never happens. So scheduling sex is not boring. In fact, it is protective. It is saying that we matter enough to prioritize this. And it doesn't have to be complicated, basically. You can simply agree to say, okay, Wednesday is our day, or Saturday is our intimacy day. And guess what happens when you schedule sex? Because I've seen this even in our own marriage. You begin to anticipate it, you prepare for it. You flirt during the day. We used to say something to ourselves that, oh, today is sex day, no fighting. You manage your energy, you show up intentionally. Couples who schedule sex often have better sex than those waiting for spontaneity to magically happen. So don't be afraid of scheduling it. It might be actually what your sex life needs now. Misconception number 9, orgasm is the goal and foreplay is just what happens before sex. This is a very limiting view of intimacy because sex does not begin in the bedroom. Sex is influenced by everything happening in the marriage. So if there are unresolved conflicts, it will affect sex. If there's no emotional connection, it will affect sex. I've had couples come to me and say they have a sex problem. And when I start to have conversations, I realize that this is not a sex problem. This is a marriage problem. If you are stressed, if there's no emotional connection, it will affect your sex life. Sex starts in the morning. It starts with how you speak to each other, how you respond to each other during the day, how you stay connected. All of that is foreplay. So no, foreplay is not just what happens before sex. It is how you live with each other every day. And when you expand your understanding of this, you begin to experience intimacy more fully that goes beyond sex. And to the final misconception number 10, my spouse should just know how to turn me on. This one is closely related to number 6, but it deserves its own space. So if you have not watched number 6, go back and watch it. Expecting your spouse to instinctively know what arouses you, especially after years of marriage, is setting the two of you up for frustration. Because what worked years ago may not work now. And that's normal. The couples who experience the most satisfying intimacy have one thing in common. They talk about sex. They talk about it outside the bedroom and during intimacy. They guide each other. They express what feels good. They stay open. They stay curious. Think of it like giving directions. When you give your spouse a map, they stop guessing. They know where to go and how to get there. But when you just say, okay, just go. Do you see how that sounds? So no, your spouse should not just know. They should be willing to learn, and you should be willing to teach them and also learn them too. That is a lot to take in, right? And I am glad you made it to the 10 points in this video. Now, let me say that nothing you've heard here is meant to shame you. It is meant to give you clarity for what you may have been experiencing silently for a long time. Because most couples are not struggling with sex itself. They are struggling with understanding. They're struggling with knowledge. They're struggling with misunderstanding. And once you begin to understand things like desire, libido, communication, effort, and timing, and all of that, you stop interpreting your experience as failure and you start seeing it as something that can be worked with. Now, I don't want you to just watch this and move on. So this is what I want you to do. Pick one thing you've heard today that really stood out to you, just one, and have a conversation with your spouse about it this week. Not a deep, intense, overwhelming conversation, just a simple, honest one about that area of your sex life. Because change in intimacy begins in the conversations that you are able to have. If this has helped you, I've created something deeper for couples who want practical guidance on how to actually rebuild intimacy step by step. I'll link all of the resources below. And do me a favor, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next video. See you next time. Bye.